In a land that gave birth to philosophy, democracy, and art, there existed a world of rituals so secret even the gods were said to turn away. Beneath marble temples and golden statues, ancient Greeks practiced ceremonies that blurred the line between faith, fear, and madness. Today, we uncover the taboos they tried to erase, the hidden side of the civilization that shaped the modern world. In the bright cradle of Western thought stood a world that worshipped reason, and yet lived in fear of what reason could never explain. Beneath marble temples and crowded marketplaces, another Greece stirred, one bound by vows of secrecy, guarded by the gods themselves. To know its truths was to risk madness. To speak them aloud was to invite divine punishment. Today, when we picture ancient Greece, we imagine philosophy, democracy, art. But every light casts a shadow, and in that shadow, rituals older than the cities themselves shaped the lives of the people who built them. Some were prayers for harvests, others attempts to speak with the dead. All of them revealed what the Greeks feared most: the unknown. The Greeks did not separate religion from daily life. Every breath, every meal, every oath carried divine consequence. The gods watched, listened, and waited. To live without ritual was to invite chaos. Along mountain paths, travelers left offerings of honey and oil at shrines so small they could fit beneath a tree root. Sailors poured wine into the sea before a voyage. Farmers whispered to invisible powers hiding in the soil. They believed that unseen spirits, the daemons, moved between mortal and divine, carrying prayers and warnings. What happened when those spirits turned silent? When the harvest failed or illness spread, fear replaced reason, and fear demanded ceremony. 20 kilometers from Athens lay a sanctuary called Eleusis. To enter its gates was to abandon the world of daylight and step into myth. Once a year, thousands joined a torchlit procession along the sacred way, chanting the names of Demeter and Persephone. They sought a promise that death was not the end. What happened inside the Telesterion, the hall of initiation, was one of the best-kept secrets in history. Participants swore silence under penalty of death. Ancient writers only hint at what they saw: the drinking of a potion called kikkion, the showing of sacred objects, the sudden blaze of light in total darkness. Many said that moment changed them forever. They left believing they had glimpsed eternity. Even powerful men, rulers, poets, generals, humbled themselves to join the ceremony. In a society obsessed with fame, the mysteries offered anonymity, unity, rebirth, and yet, their secrecy terrified the state. What power could command such loyalty beyond the city's laws? What truth was worth dying to protect? But what truly happened inside those walls? The question haunted Greece for centuries, and still does. On a rocky slope at Delphi, smoke rose from a fissure in the earth. There, the voice of Apollo was said to speak through a woman known as the Pythia. Seated above the vapors, she entered a trance, her words fractured, poetic, and terrifying. Kings traveled for months to ask their questions. Empires rose and fell on her riddles. Scientists today debate whether volcanic gases caused the visions, or whether the priests crafted them with theatrical precision. But to the Greeks, the oracle's voice was divine, a bridge between certainty and chaos. Every prophecy carried double meanings, as if the gods themselves enjoyed watching mortals misinterpret fate. The oracle's fame became its curse. When politics replaced piety, Delphi's silence marked the fading of an era. Yet even in ruins, travelers claimed they could still feel the hum of something ancient beneath the stone. Beneath the grandeur of temples lay a fear that touched every home. Pollution of the soul, miasma. To kill, to lie, to witness death, all invited contamination. A polluted person could doom an entire household. So rituals of cleansing became essential. Seawater, fire, sulfur, smoke, the sacrifice of a piglet, the careful washing of hands in silence. Archaeologists have found basins carved beside doorways, filled not with drinking water but with the remains of burnt offerings, proof that cleansing was constant, almost obsessive. To be pure was to be safe. To be safe was to be seen by the gods. But what happens when a society begins to fear impurity more than injustice? When morality becomes ritual, and ritual becomes habit, in the name of holiness, cruelty can hide, and the Greeks, for all their brilliance, were not immune. Every spring, Athens surrendered itself to the god Dionysus. For days, the city transformed into a theater, literally. Actors donned masks. Citizens wept, laughed, and screamed as tragedies unfolded before them. These performances were not entertainment, they were purification. By confronting chaos on stage, the people believed they kept it from their own lives. Yet the same god was worshipped far from the city, in wild hills and forests. There, his followers danced until consciousness dissolved. They believed the god entered them, that in losing control, they touched the divine. To outsiders, it looked like madness. To those within, it was freedom, a surrender of the self to something larger, older, unknowable. Reason and frenzy, Apollo and Dionysus were the twin pillars of Greek spirit, and between them stretched a thin bridge of ritual, always in danger of collapse. Civilization, the Greeks believed, was a fragile gift from the gods, a flame that needed constant tending. They built their temples not to celebrate certainty but to hold back doubt. Every ritual, every taboo, was a shield against the chaos waiting at the edge of reason. In our modern world of light and logic, it is easy to forget how thin that shield remains. Perhaps that is why their stories still haunt us, because the same fear that moved them still flickers behind our own pursuit of truth. They worshipped beauty, but feared their gods. In every temple of ancient Greece, there was devotion and dread, because faith, to them, was never love alone. It was a contract, fragile, conditional, easily broken. And when that contract failed, punishment came swiftly. The same gods who inspired art, poetry, and law also demanded sacrifice, not of wealth, but of obedience. To anger them was to invite plague, famine, or war. The Greeks did not pray for mercy. They bargained for survival. Every disaster had a reason: a failed harvest. Someone had spoken against Demeter, a storm at sea. Poseidon had been slighted. Even an illness in a single child could be read as punishment from the gods. In a world without science, faith was their explanation, and fear was their compass. Priests and seers became interpreters of divine anger, guiding communities with omens, sacrifices, and dreams. One inscription found near Corinth records a chilling ritual: a group of citizens slaughtering animals at midnight, pleading with Zeus to cease his fury. The blood was poured into the earth, a message to the underworld, an apology sent below. To the Greeks, the gods were not silent, they were watching, and the line between reverence and terror was razor-thin. The ancient world was addicted to prophecy. Men marched to war, lovers married, cities were founded, all in the words of oracles. But prophecy was never clear. It was designed to test the listener's mind and loyalty. When King Croesus asked the oracle if he should attack Persia, the Pythia replied, "If you cross the river, a great empire will fall." He crossed, his own empire fell. That was the power of divine riddles. Truth twisted just enough to prove that mortals were never truly in control. The Greeks believed the gods spoke in ambiguity, because clarity was too great a gift for humankind. And so they built shrines not for answers, but for humility, reminders that even kings knelt before mystery. Of all sins in Greek thought, none was greater than hubris, the arrogance of believing one could challenge the divine. Poets warned of it. Tragedies were built upon it. Icarus flew too close to the sun. Oedipus defied fate. Agamemnon mocked the gods and lost everything. These were not just stories, they were warnings. Every audience understood. Pride invites ruin. In temples, offerings were left not just to honor the gods, but to remind oneself of limits. A whisper often accompanied a prayer: "Remember, I am mortal." Yet even in humility, the Greeks sought power through ritual ways to bend destiny, to speak the language of gods without permission. And that was where their faith became something darker. Not all worship was public. In quiet rooms, in forest clearings, in caves by the sea, private cults thrived, hidden from state eyes. Some worshipped foreign deities from Egypt and Asia Minor. Others created personal gods, spirits that answered only to them. These secret sects performed rites that mixed ecstasy, fear, and trance. Offerings of wine, honey, and animal blood were common. Some rituals were said to involve sleep deprivation, chanting, and isolation, forcing the mind to break, then cease. To outsiders, these ceremonies were dangerous, but to followers, they were sacred, a direct path to divinity without priest or city. The authorities called them theozoi, illegal gatherings, but they spread like wildfire, because they promised something public religion could not: personal revelation. As centuries passed, the balance began to crumble. Philosophers questioned old beliefs. Empires rose and imposed new gods, new laws, new order. The great temples of Zeus and Apollo grew empty. The smoke of sacrifice faded, and the once feared gods began to fall silent. Yet silence did not mean death. The Greeks believed the divine never vanished. It merely changed its face. Old rituals slipped into new religions. Old prayers reshaped in new tongues. The fear remained, only hidden beneath different names. Faith had been the heart of Greece, and its chain. Through devotion and terror, it bound mortals to powers beyond them. But when that chain broke, the question lingered: if the gods no longer rule us, what does? Perhaps the answer is the same as it was thousands of years ago. Not gods carved in stone, but fears carved into us. The rituals may have ended, but the shadows they cast still walk beside us. They called it divine madness, but to those who lived it, it was freedom. In the hidden corners of ancient Greece, far from the marble steps of the temples, groups gathered beneath the moonlight. They danced until their names were forgotten, their voices lost in chants older than civilization itself. To outsiders, they were heretics. To themselves, they were gods reborn. The god of wine, of theater, of chaos, Dionysus was unlike any other. His worshippers were not kings or philosophers, but peasants, women, and outcasts. They called themselves the Maenads, the raving ones. To honor their god, they abandoned cities and climbed into the wild hills. There, under torchlight, they entered trance through song, rhythm, and dance. They believed that in losing control, they were filled with divine spirit, enthusiasmos, the literal entering of the god. These rituals terrified the powerful. The idea that the divine could touch the lowest citizen, that a slave could be closer to God than a ruler, was unthinkable. City laws tried to suppress the Dionysian rites. But like the god himself, they refused to die. They simply moved deeper underground. In every age, people have sought escape from the weight of reason. The Greeks turned that yearning into religion. The rites of Dionysus were more than celebration. They were rebellion against order, logic, and control. Witnesses claimed that the initiates tore apart live animals, that they drank the blood of sacrifice, that they screamed the god's name until sunrise. But others, quieter voices, said the violence was symbolic, that the tearing apart represented the shattering of the self, and the wine, the blood of transformation. Either way, when dawn came, participants believed they had died and been reborn, and in a way, perhaps they had. Not all seekers of divine union turned to frenzy. Another path, older and quieter, followed the teachings of the mythical musician Orpheus, who was said to have descended into the underworld and returned alive. His followers, the Orphics, lived by strict purity, no meat, no impure acts, and endless cycles of ritual cleansing. They believed the soul was trapped in the body as punishment, and that through initiation, one could escape the cycle of rebirth. To them, life itself was a prison. Salvation meant remembering who they truly were, fragments of divine essence, fallen into flesh. Their hymns spoke of cosmic order, of harmony between soul and universe. But their rituals remained hidden, known only to the initiated. Ancient inscriptions mention a golden tablet buried with the dead, inscribed with a message for the soul to present before the gods. I am a child of earth and starry heaven, but my race is of heaven alone. In those words lies the heart of Greek mysticism, the belief that within every mortal, something eternal still breathed. What all these cults shared, Dionysian, Eleusinian, was one dangerous idea, that the line between human and divine could be crossed. To the state, this was subversion. To the philosophers, it was madness. But to the faithful, it was revelation. The Greeks believed that divine truth could not be learned, it had to be experienced. Through ecstasy, pain, and surrender, one could touch eternity, if only for a heartbeat. This was not metaphor, it was faith made flesh. And in those moments, when self dissolved into something infinite, they felt closer to immortality than any temple could promise. But ecstasy has a cost. Many who sought divine union never returned to reason. Their minds shattered under visions they could not explain. Others were exiled, branded as mad, or executed as heretics. The state feared that private gods could lead to rebellion. A citizen who served a personal deity could not be controlled by civic law, so the secret gatherings were hunted. Their sacred texts burned, their names erased from records. But like every forbidden faith, they survived, whispered, reimagined, reborn. Their language of ecstasy found its way into later religions, into mysticism, into art. Even today, echoes of those ancient chants linger in our festivals, in our music, in the way we seek transcendence through chaos. To the Greeks, the divine was not a distant ruler, but a reflection, something inside each soul waiting to awaken. They believed that truth was not taught but remembered, a spark that lived within every mortal, waiting to ignite. Perhaps that is why, even now, we still chase that same flame through art, through passion, through madness. Because deep down, we are still the children of that ancient world, still reaching for the gods that once danced among us. Faith can unite a people, but in the wrong hands, it can rule them. In ancient Greece, the gods were everywhere, in the sky, in the sea, in the silence between words. But behind that beauty lay something far more human. Religion was not only worship, it was strategy. And those who learned to control it, controlled everything. To the Greeks, temples were more than houses of the gods. They were banks, law courts, and symbols of power. When a city built a temple, it was not just piety, it was politics carved in stone. A grand shrine declared to the world that gods favor us. And if the gods favored you, who would dare to stand against you? The priests of great sanctuaries like Delphi, Olympia, and Eleusis held influence equal to kings. Their words shaped trade routes, alliances, even wars. A single prophecy could decide the fate of nations. Faith became currency, invisible, but priceless. And like any currency, it could be forged, spent, or stolen. No voice carried more weight than that of the oracle at Delphi. Her words guided generals, advised lawmakers, and justified conquest. But behind the sacred curtains stood an entire system: priests, scribes, interpreters, who filtered and crafted her divine messages. To the faithful, she was Apollo's mouthpiece. To the powerful, she was a tool. Records suggest city-states sent gifts to Delphi: gold, silver, even armies in exchange for favorable prophecies. When Sparta prepared for war, the oracle declared their cause. Just when Athens sought expansion, Apollo's blessing conveniently followed. The gods, it seemed, always agreed with whoever paid the most. Yet the people still believed, not because they were fools, but because faith gave meaning to fear. To question the oracle was to question the order of the world itself. That as Greek city-states grew richer, religion became a theater of control. Festivals honored gods, but they also displayed wealth and dominance. When Athens held the Panathenaic Games, the city paraded not just devotion, but superiority. Statues gleamed with gold, offerings filled altars, and poets sang hymns that praised Athens as if it were divine. The boundary between faith and patriotism blurred. To worship Athena was to serve the city. To doubt her was treason. It was a brilliant design. Make loyalty to the gods equal loyalty to the state, and you would never rule by fear alone. Even war was sanctified. Before battle, generals consulted omens, sacrificed animals, and claimed their victories as divine will. Defeat was never their failure, it was the gods' punishment for someone else's sin. But every system built on faith must guard itself against doubt. In Greece, that meant silencing those who asked the wrong questions. Philosophers who challenged the divine order paid a high price. The playwright Euripides hinted that the gods might be inventions of men, and was driven into exile. Later, Socrates stood trial, not just for corrupting youth, but for introducing new gods. His crime was simple. He had taught people to think for themselves. His punishment was death. When he drank the poison, Athens didn't just kill a man, it killed the idea that truth could exist without divine permission. Fear of impiety became a weapon sharper than any sword. To question the gods was to question the rulers who spoke for them. As centuries passed, the balance between faith and power began to crumble. War drained the cities, trade routes shifted, and new empires rose from the east. The old gods, once protectors of freedom, became symbols of oppression. When Rome conquered Greece, they adopted its gods, but stripped them of mystery. Temples became museums, rituals became spectacles, and belief became performance. The divine was still spoken of, but few still listened, and in that silence, new faiths emerged, ones that promised salvation not through the city, but through the soul. The age of the Olympians was ending. The age of gods, as rulers, was fading. Yet their shadow remained in law, in politics, in the way humans still seek authority in the name of heaven. Power wears many faces: king, priest, prophet, politician. But the game remains the same. Those who claim to speak for the divine always find a way to rule the living. The Greeks were the first to build a civilization on reason, and yet, even they could not escape the hunger for gods, because power is never content to rule bodies alone. It must rule belief. It must rule the soul, and that is the oldest ritual of all. Even the mightiest gods are not immortal. When humans forget to believe, the gods of ancient Greece once ruled every aspect of life, from the rise of the sun to the falling of rain, from the law of men to the beating of hearts. They were feared, loved, and obeyed. But they depended on a fragile thing: faith. And when that faith faded, their world began to crumble. By the 4th century BCE, Athens and other city-states had built a civilization unmatched in human history. Philosophy, science, and democracy blossomed. Thinkers like Plato and Aristotle began to question the old stories, the myths, the oracles, the prophecies. The gods, once unquestionable, became subjects of debate. Could lightning be explained without Zeus? Could disease strike without divine wrath? Slowly, reason began to pierce the veil of myth. Citizens still honored temples, still offered sacrifices, but increasingly, their devotion was ritual without fear, custom without belief. The silence of the gods began not in temples, but in minds. Across Greece, grand temples once filled with chanting and smoke grew quiet. Statues, once vibrant with devotion, became cold marble guardians of empty courtyards. The Eleusinian mysteries, the Dionysian rites, the Orphic initiations all survived, but only as shadow plays. Few dared the full experience. Fewer still believed in the old promises. Priests kept rituals alive, but their power waned. No oracle could inspire armies. No hymn could stop famine. No sacrifice could halt war. Worship became performance, and performance is no substitute for faith. When Rome rose to dominate Greece, it absorbed its gods, its temples, and its festivals. But the Olympians were transformed into symbols, stripped of their authority. Jupiter replaced Zeus, Venus replaced Aphrodite, and temples were repurposed as civic halls. The gods became stories, cautionary tales of human ambition, not living powers. What had once inspired awe now inspired only nostalgia, yet the memory of divine influence lingered in law, in philosophy, in the way people still spoke of fate, destiny, and the invisible hand of higher powers. While empires shifted, Greek philosophers pursued a new kind of divinity, one rooted in reason. Plato spoke of perfect forms, Aristotle of natural law. The divine became abstract, impersonal, internal. Humanity no longer needed to kneel to the gods, it needed only to seek truth. Yet even in reason, echoes of the old gods remained. Their shadows colored morality, ethics, and law. The stories of Olympus became metaphors, guiding human behavior long after the sacrifices stopped. The gods were dead, not in body, but in relevance. And for the first time, humanity faced the terrifying freedom of self-determination. The death of the gods did not erase them. They lingered in art, in theater, in poetry, in the names of cities and mountains. They survived as myths, carrying wisdom and warnings across millennia. And their silence left a gift, the understanding that divinity resides within, not above. Humanity could now imagine morality without fear, creation without command, and life without an overseer. Yet every temple ruin, every faint echo of ritual, reminds us the gods once ruled here, and the world remembers the power of belief, even when belief fades. The gods are silent now. Their thrones lie empty. Their voices echo only in memory. But perhaps that is the most human lesson of all. Civilizations rise and fall. Myths live and die. Belief transforms into understanding. And still, the shadow of the divine shapes the world in ways we may never fully see. The gods are gone, but their shadows remain. Civilization, for all its light and reason, is shaped by what came before. The rituals, the mysteries, the fear, and devotion of ancient Greece. They were not just acts of faith. They were lessons, etched in stone and memory, waiting for humanity to decipher. To walk among the ruins of Athens or Delphi is to feel the weight of history. The lives of those who prayed, who danced, who feared, who questioned. Their whispers still linger in the wind. The Greeks believed the world was governed by forces beyond comprehension. Fear guided behavior as much as hope. Obedience ensured survival. Ritual enforced social order. Yet these same rituals birthed philosophy, art, and law, tools we now take for granted. There is a lesson here. Faith, even when cloaked in fear, can inspire civilization. But blind obedience carries danger, as every story of hubris, exile, and punishment in Greek history proves. Balance is key to learn from devotion without surrendering reason. Mystery was the Greeks' most potent tool. The Eleusinian mysteries, the Orphic rites, and the cults of Dionysus thrived on secrecy. People craved the unknown, the chance to glimpse the infinite, even at great personal risk. In a world where every fact could be dissected, the power of what could not be explained captivated hearts and minds. Today, we still hunger for mystery. In art, in science, in our own private beliefs. The Greeks remind us that the unknown can inspire both wonder and caution. Ancient Greece teaches us about the duality of human nature. Reason and madness, devotion and fear, obedience and rebellion all existed side by side. Temples housed philosophers and priests. Forests sheltered ecstatic rites. Society demanded order. The soul craved freedom. The Greeks did not resolve these conflicts. They lived them, and in doing so, they left us a blueprint of human complexity, a reminder that greatness and chaos often coexist, though their gods fell silent. Their influence endures. Democracy, theater, philosophy, and law all are born of the same soil that nurtured ritual, fear, and devotion. Every modern idea of morality, politics, and knowledge owes a debt to the Greek struggle between order and chaos. And even in our age of science, their myths still resonate. They warn, they inspire, they remind us of what it means to be human. Perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this: the gods may be gone, but their echoes remain in the choices we make, the systems we build, the fears we guard, and the art we create. Humanity thrives on stories, rituals, and mysteries, even when we no longer believe in the gods themselves. In ancient Greece, devotion and fear shaped civilization. Today, curiosity and reflection continue that legacy. The flame of their world still flickers, guiding us not as rulers, but as mirrors. The temples lie in ruins. The rituals are forgotten. The oracles speak no more. Yet the lessons endure. We are the heirs of a civilization that lived between faith and fear, reason and madness, the mortal and the divine. And perhaps, by listening closely to the echoes of Olympus, we can learn not just who they were, but who we are, and who we might yet become.